blueprints of an impossible sanctuary. Some ideas arrive quietly. Others break into the world like a challenge. This sanctuary belonged to the second kind, a vision so ambitious that even those who believed in it whispered doubts behind closed doors, because the land it demanded was unyielding, and the dream it promised defied every conventional limit. At first, it looked like nothing more than a sketch, elegant lines sweeping across paper, tracing the outline of a hotel suspended between wilderness and sky. But that sketch carried an audacity that stirred architects and unnerved engineers. To bring such a place into existence, they would need to attempt what no blueprint had ever dared to predict. Understanding why the sanctuary matters today requires returning to a moment when the industry was shifting. Luxury travel was no longer about grandeur alone. Guests wanted meaning, immersion, connection. They wanted a destination that didn't just display beauty, but transformed their sense of place. And so the creators set out to design a retreat that felt untouched, weightless, almost impossible. The initial vision relied on harmony, a structure that would feel carved from the landscape rather than imposed upon it. But that harmony introduced a labyrinth of complications. The terrain refused symmetry. Weather patterns disrupted early models. Every test revealed fractures in what seemed like a perfectly balanced design. Yet each failure only pushed the team deeper into the idea. The first breakthrough came unexpectedly. An engineer noticed that a natural ridge created protective wind corridors. If the sanctuary aligned with these currents, the entire structure could lighten, almost float. This was the moment the project shifted from a daring concept to a living possibility. It was no longer about forcing architecture into stubborn terrain. It was about listening to the land and letting the land guide the shape. But even with this revelation, the challenges multiplied. Sourcing materials that could withstand isolation without feeling industrial, calculating supports that held firm without breaking the illusion of weightlessness, finding ways to preserve the untouched character of the environment while building something that had never existed there before. Each step brought wonder and frustration in equal measure. The sanctuary had to be safe, yet invisible, strong yet delicate, present yet seemingly impossible. And while the world watched from afar, unaware of the struggle, the team found themselves drawn into a deeper truth. Creating a masterpiece often means surrendering to a process far more complex than the dream that sparked it. By the time they realized what lay ahead, the sanctuary's story had already begun, a journey into the limits of design, ambition, and the fine line between vision and risk. Progress moved forward, but never in a straight line. Every time the team solved one challenge, another emerged. The terrain shifted under heavy equipment. Fog corroded early metal samples. Even the foundation tests revealed that the soil behaved differently depending on the season. It was as if the land was reminding them that it could not be predicted, only respected. Still, they pressed on. The sanctuary demanded precision, but it also demanded surrender, a willingness to adapt to the environment's quiet contradictions. Some days the breakthroughs felt monumental. Other days, the setbacks erased weeks of work in a single breath. The project became a study in extremes. When the first structural frame rose, it sparked a wave of optimism. Workers paused to take in the view, seeing steel lines outline what would someday be windows suspended over open air. For a moment, the impossible felt tangible. The sanctuary seemed within reach. But that moment didn't last. The frame trapped wind in ways no simulation had captured. On calm days, it hummed like a distant echo. On turbulent days, it shuddered with unsettling force. Engineers gathered in long meetings, voices low, calculations frantic. Reinforcing the frame threatened to alter the sanctuary's delicate silhouette, the very illusion that defined its beauty. Tension grew quietly but steadily. The designers argued for elegance, the engineers for stability. Neither could bend without betraying the project's soul. And beneath their debates lay a shared truth. The sanctuary could not exist if either side dominated. Balance was the only path forward. The inner chambers brought a new wave of conflict. These rooms were meant to feel like extensions of the sky, each one opening into vast, uninterrupted views. But creating uninterrupted views required eliminating traditional supports, a decision that defied standard safety models. The team explored materials that were rare, expensive, and unfamiliar. Suppliers hesitated. Regulators asked questions the team didn't yet have answers for. Meanwhile, whispers of delay reached investors. Concern shifted into pressure. Deadlines tightened. And in the quiet hours, members of the team wondered if they had reached too far. If this sanctuary, in all its beauty, was asking for more than they could give. Even the smallest miscalculation now carried enormous weight. A mismeasurement, a flawed joint, a misread weather report. Everything mattered. Everything carried risk. Yet, through the mounting tension, something else began to take shape, a sense that the sanctuary was slowly revealing its terms. It wasn't resisting the team. It was teaching them how to proceed. And with each lesson, the conflict deepened, pushing the project toward a moment of reckoning neither side could avoid. As the sanctuary grew higher, the conflict reached its sharpest point. The structure was no longer just a concept on paper. It was a presence on the horizon, a reminder that ambition carries a weight far heavier than steel. And with every new meter of elevation, the pressure surrounding the project intensified. Engineers warned that the sanctuary's weight distribution was reaching a critical threshold. Designers argued that altering the shape would destroy the illusion of suspension that defined the entire vision. Meetings stretched late into the night, filled with voices that were calm on the surface but strained beneath every word. The sanctuary had become a battleground between elegance and physics, idealism and reality. Outside, the environment added its own demands. A sudden shift in weather patterns carved deep channels into the cliffside, undermining ground readings the team had trusted for months. Sensors picked up micro-movements in the terrain. Subtle, but enough to spark fear that the foundation might need to be rebuilt. That single possibility threatened to unravel years of progress. Workers felt the tension in every directive. A misaligned beam or a late delivery could ripple through the entire structure. The sanctuary was delicate, sensitive, responding to each decision like a living thing. Some began to question whether it wanted to exist at all, but the most intense conflict unfolded within the team itself. The lead architect, once the calm center of the project, now stood divided between preserving the sanctuary's aesthetic purity and accepting necessary compromises. The chief engineer, worn by sleepless nights and relentless calculations, pushed for reinforcements that would reshape the design's signature lines. Their visions clashed like opposing tides, neither wrong, neither yielding. The emotional weight became unavoidable. What began as inspiration now felt like responsibility bordering on burden. They weren't just building a hotel. They were attempting to bend the laws of their craft, to create something that felt untouched by gravity. And that dream, once exhilarating, now pressed down on them with full force. One afternoon, a violent gust swept across the ridge, rattling scaffolding and sending tools scattering. It lasted seconds, but it changed everything. When the wind settled, the team inspected the structure and discovered tiny fractures along one of the tension supports. Fractures that could have gone unnoticed until it was too late. The discovery shook them more than the wind itself. Nature had offered a warning. The sanctuary demanded complete attention, complete humility. That moment became the catalyst for an emotional shift. The team realized they could no longer cling to the original design as if it were sacred. Survival required adaptation. Beauty required compromise. And the sanctuary, in all its fragile, breathtaking ambition, needed them to let go of perfection in order to reach its true form. The build-up toward the breakthrough began quietly. Engineers recalculated load paths. Designers sketched new contours. And for the first time in months, their ideas converged instead of colliding. They stood on the edge of something transformative, knowing the next decision could define not only the sanctuary, but the legacy of everyone involved. The breakthrough emerged not from triumph, but from surrender. When the team finally accepted that the sanctuary could not be forced into perfection, the design unlocked itself. Lines softened, support shifted, the weight of expectation lifted. What remained was a structure that honored the landscape instead of resisting it, a sanctuary shaped by wind, gravity, and patience. Once the redesigned supports were installed, the tension that haunted the project began to ease. Tests that once ended in failure now showed stability. Stress points that threatened collapse dissolved into balanced, natural curves. The sanctuary no longer strained to appear weightless. It simply became weightless in spirit. The true climax came during the final structural test. As dawn broke, the team gathered on the ridge, their breasts tight with anticipation. Sensors flickered to life, data streamed across screens, and the sanctuary, suspended between earth and sky, held steady with a quiet confidence they had never seen before. No tremors, no warnings, just a profound stillness. It was as if the structure had finally aligned with the world around it. Emotion swept the team in waves. Relief, pride, exhaustion, disbelief. Years of doubt and conflict dissolved in the golden morning light. The sanctuary stood not as a trophy of human will, but as proof that vision thrives when ego steps aside. In that moment, everything they had endured felt necessary. Every setback had been a guide. Every conflict had revealed the next step. And every compromise had carved the sanctuary closer to its truth. Visitors would eventually describe the place as suspended serenity, a retreat that feels both grounded and impossible. But few would ever know the storms behind its calm, the risks taken, the arguments that forged clarity, the night winds that whispered warnings, the morning light that granted permission to continue. And that is a legacy of the impossible sanctuary, not that it defied nature, but that it learned to harmonize with it. In a world obsessed with speed and spectacle, this creation stands as a reminder that the most powerful beauty often comes from restraint, patience, and the courage to adapt. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future.